Ladies and gentlemen, we'll continue with part two. I know some people will be relatively surprised to hear the words militant, radical, along with Rory McShane, but that's how Tommy came to find them just before he came into the loop. So we'll have to explain that. We're also joined by Margo Collins. I was getting worried a bit about the gender balance, and it looked as if only men were involved in the civil rights movement in Newry. We're not clearly not the case. And ironically, but I've never met her before today, Geraldine Donaghy did mention her name to me as we were marching around Newry. She said, you come into the Sacred Heart like a tour de force, I think was the way she described it. So I reckon that if you could take on the nuns, taking on the RUC, it's actually probably no bother me at all. So, again, to give us a bit of a flavour of their experiences at that time, from them, this is a personal experience, so you know, you may disagree with part of what they say or whatever, that doesn't really matter. This is what they remember, this is what reasons why they participated and why they got involved. So, Margo and Rory, thank you very much for coming along. If we start with, as I described him when he was out of the room, the Wolfie Smith of Newry, the citizen McShane, why did you get involved with the PD?
Mr. Chairman, comrades, it's nice to be speaking in Newry. I wasn't in Newry for the march.
We'd leave you doors that bullet, yes.
I was a student in Queen's. I was president of the Students' Union in 68-69. I wasn't back at home until September of 1970. But I had been involved in the civil rights movement. After the 5th of October situation in Derry, I decided to go and visit Bill Craig at his home on the Ormeau embankment. And I brought about 2,000 of my closest and dearest friends with me to visit Mr. Craig on that particular day. And later that week, we organised a demonstration from the Students' Union down to the City Hall. And as you know, that was blocked by Paisley and Bunting and so on. And we had the sit down at the City Hall. And eventually, we all marched back to the Students' Union. And that was the formation of the People's Democracy. And I chaired the first meeting of it. And I can remember for the first time seeing a tiny young girl standing up and saying, in the context of having to put your name down for a further march, I remember her standing up saying, I have nothing to lose but a degree in psychology. And that girl was Bernadette Devlin McAliskey. And that was the first time that she had really got involved in a public way. So my background at that stage was very much in the student milieu. Michael Farrell had come to me and asked me would I join the marchers for the long march from Belfast to Derry, and it was just after Christmas, and I said, look Michael, I'm supposed to be in Dublin for a USI meeting representing Queen's there at a meeting. I said the best I could do for you is the first 2 days. Was I, the lucky boy, missed the last day, which was Burntollet, and as Tommy has said earlier, the appalling behaviour that occurred at Burntollet, of course, led then to solidarity throughout Northern Ireland, and led, of course, to the 69 March, which we commemorate today. And of course, I continued involvement with civil rights when I came back to Newry, and was involved in a number of marches and demonstrations, and was on the executive of NICRA, and was one of those involved in the organisation of the Bloody Sunday march, and with Margo and the late Sean Hollywood and many others. We were involved then in the subsequent march here in Newry, which was totally peaceful, and as you will recall, thereafter Stormont was prorogued, and we felt that we had, by all of that activity from 68 through to 72, achieved much in terms of civil rights, and we felt that the end of the Stormont Parliament and all that it stood for and all that went with it was a wonderful achievement. I'm sure Margo shares that same sympathy.
Margo, a lady from Mayo, you come to Newry, You know, I just left my aunt back last week to the States, and she left nearly out of the troubles, and she went to Philadelphia and went to the riots. You came from a nice quiet part of Mayo and came here. Why did you get involved?
That's a big question. Well, first of all, I came from a small farming background in Mayo, and I was always very nationalist and I suppose Republican. And I wanted to see the North. I wanted to, you know, to me, this border shouldn't be there, and I wanted to go north. So when I applied for jobs, I applied for all five in the North, and Newry turned up, so I took it. And I went to the Sacred Heart, and first year there was no great activity, but I was very aware of unemployment in the town because children in the classes would tell me that their dads were unemployed and their granddads had been unemployed, so I knew it was very much a problem here. But at that stage there was no activity. But then, like for everyone else, October 5th happened, and I distinctly remember sitting. I was in Dinks and John Mitchell Place, and I went into the sitting room to look at him. I was on my own, and the overhead broke loose, and going through my head was, this is it. It'll never be the same again. So I went into school. Geraldine down there, who was one of my students, she reminds me that at the time there was no Irish history on the course, and I rebelled against this and insisted that part of the class was given over to Irish history, and did a bit of indoctrination, Geraldine. But I went in on the Monday, and I must have been ranting and raving anyway about the previous Saturday. So the meeting was called, PD meeting was called, that week, I think it was, that week. And of course I went along, and to my great surprise, when they started appointing members of the committee, one of my students, Pat Brown, Jerry Brown's daughter, stood up and said, I nominate Miss Collins. So that was it. I was involved, and I just took it from there, and I stayed involved right up until the March after Bloody Sunday. Rory and myself and Sean and Detta, remember Detta? Detta, the four of us travelled to Derry on that day. And we had a march the following Saturday, and really that was the end of the civil rights movement, because the men with the guns had moved in at that stage. And while most of the civil rights demands were met, really at that stage too, but there was no point in protests or marches anymore, because they were too violent from there on in.
Okay.
And the one thing that was pointed out to me, my husband said to me last night, he said, how come you were never chairman of Newry Civil Rights? And it never occurred to me, because girls in those days, they were the secretaries, and they wrote the letters, and they played a nice background thing. And I remember the night of internment. Now Sean Hollywood I knew, and Sean had been on the periphery, but the night of internment, I was down in Drummalane organising barricades, and Sean, whose aunt lived down there, came along, and I said, come on Sean, time for you to join up and that. So he came in, and he became chairman. And it never struck me that there was anything, you know, we were talking about one man, one vote. Not one woman, one vote, was one man. So I was always the secretary. I'm not complaining, but I'm just saying that was the mores of the time, and that. But things have changed. But that's how I became involved, and that's how I stayed involved.
Can I? Thank you. Had you gone to teach in the Abbey instead of Sacred Heart, you would have discovered that the Christian Brothers actually were teaching Irish history rather aggressively, the older British version, if I remember. I don't even think it was on the curriculum. In relation to going out there, putting yourselves out, will seem alien to a lot of the younger people in the audience, because you had much to lose, and you know, you were at university, you were teaching, careers could be ended by such involvement. Did fear never come into the equation?
Oh yeah, fear came into it all right. I can remember being down at the City Hall at one of the demonstrations, and three gentlemen clearly who were coming up to speak to me clearly weren't doing so with with any kind of positive intent. But it certainly wasn't friendly. So I can remember going in, as I thought, very sensibly into a life assurance office and asking them in the office would they mind phoning the police, because I certainly definitely felt threatened. I can remember in some of the student accommodation I stayed in Belfast, I remember it being set on fire on one occasion. And yes, I mean, I've had letters from the police warning me about my safety. I had 2 bullets delivered to my Kilkeel office, one with my name on it and one with my wife's name on it, only they just couldn't spell Angela terribly well. But yeah, we've sort of had all that kind of stuff down the years, but you took your stand and you said, this isn't right. What I'm standing up for here, what we're standing up for here is justice, this is the right thing to do. And yeah, there were issues there, and you just took those on board, and that was part of the times, and you got on with it.
Margo, what about yourself?
I think I was too stupid at the time to be afraid of anything, and to me, this was my mission in life, was to get civil rights, and I didn't really give much thought to danger. And you know, later on, when Sam Dowling became chairman, Sam insisted that we start going into unionist areas with our message. And of course we were chased out of, there's some place up at the top of Newry on the Belfast Road, I forget the name of it. Chased, what's that? That's it. We were chased out of there. We went to Rathfriland. They threw everything under the sun. They threw everything under the sun and was there. In fact, it hit the headlines in the morning when I went into school. All the teachers were telling me about it. And we went to Banbridge, and the same thing, the police removed us for our own safety. But I don't know, young, didn't really think about dangers, didn't think about saving myself. I was in there and that was it. So I can't say I was ever afraid, and I should have been.
Shouldn't. Rory, the PDs were seen as the more militant end. I suppose if we were to draw a comparison today, probably the momentum of their day. I mean, why did it become so radical, and why did it end up sort of half separated from the civil rights movement?
Well, it was led by people who were of the left in Queens, people like Eamon McCann, Michael Farrell, and people around the Labour group, and the campaign for nuclear disarmament was still alright. So the kind of leadership, if you like, was quite left wing, and the perception was that there were problems in Northern Ireland, but there were equally problems in the Republic. And part of the slogan from PD people was, Tories out, North and South. It wasn't just a focus entirely on Northern Ireland, and in a sense trying to outreach perhaps into the wider community. And it has to be said, at the beginning of the civil rights campaign in Queens, a lot of people from the Protestant Unionist tradition were very supportive of it. But once it turned and became violent, then that kind of support drifted away. And then there was the kind of concerns that Tommy has expressed earlier, that of the dangers of street demonstrations, how that could lead to other problems. And it wasn't that, I can remember the PD march to Derry, that there were definite disagreements as to whether that should happen or not. And people like Kevin Boyle were actively saying this should not occur. But Kevin went anyway because a lot of his students were going, and he felt that he ought to be there. So it wasn't that it was just completely unified in that regard, but there was some very strong people there in leadership who were pushing that on in a way that the NICRA executive were being a lot more cautious perhaps than what the PD was.
Margo, the talk a little bit about the sense of solidarity and the people that you came across when you were in it, because it seems as if, I don't know about the other people in the room, but those of you who were around it there, the way you welcomed each other today, the way you shook hands with each other, embraced each other, a lot of you actually seem to build up a lot of solidarity.
Oh yeah, there was great friendship, there were great friendships forged, and we were a cohesive group, there's no doubt about it. If I may, I didn't expect this question and answer today, but I had come with the intention of paying tribute to an awful lot of people who were involved and who, unfortunately, are not with us today. Now I see, I don't know if he's still here, I see Paddy O'Hanlon's cousin, Dr. Rory McShane there. And your sisters are there, Paddy's sisters. Well, Paddy and Tommy and myself were little triumvirs at the head of this thing, and we had good times together too. And when Paddy stood for election, my apartment became his headquarters. And the activity that went on there, with the result that the RUC parked outside the thing, and I was turfed out by the landlord. So I was on the streets and homeless once again. But I have very fond memories of Paddy. And also, I'm digressing, and I'm sorry for this. But I remember one night before he was elected, being out in some little country place, and Paddy getting up with his guitar and singing, "I can't help but wonder where I'm bound." And I've never forgotten it. We had some good times together. And of course his brother Jerry as well, both deceased now. And I believe, I've been told here today, that Jerry went on to found a resource centre here for children who were taken from their parents, which is a very good thing. And in fact, an awful lot of people who were involved in the early years went on to work with civil rights organisations. I myself worked for Troker for years, and I was also on the executive of the anti-apartheid movement. So even though I left Newry, I didn't give up my activities. And Michael Farrell, involved with legal aid and very involved in anti-apartheid. I meet Michael all the time in Dublin. And lots more, you know, they kept up. Kevin McCorry became involved in community work. He was on the executive in Belfast. So it was something that, you talk about left and right. I didn't know my left from my right when I joined it, but I learned an awful lot about politics and movements and left and right as the time went on. And a lot of that I have to pay tribute to the Workers' Party for. I wasn't a member, but I was welcomed into the bosom of them, and I learned an awful lot from them because they were more aware than I was, and I was willing to learn. But also, I'm sorry, I'm digressing again, but there's Dickie Rogers, of course, who's very prominent in the thing. Dickie died a few years ago. Hugh Golding, Hugh Lewis, very few people might remember Hugh, but he was involved. Then there was Joe Carlin. Joe had a little record shop down in Hill Street. He was involved. Paul Hoban. What? Remember Paul? Yeah.
Who do we forget him?
He was a great character. And let me see, Oliver McCall, Jimmy Boyle. Now Kevin was very prominent at that time. Sorry, I can't read with glasses on. Kevin, but Jimmy joined up, and Jimmy was very active. And Jimmy and I were the best of pals. I loved Jimmy. And one memory I have from it was the time when Star Wars started on television. So no matter where Jimmy or myself were at meetings or whatever, we'd always manage to get back for Star Wars. Sam Dowling, never to be forgotten. Sam was a dynamo, and there are a lot of things Sam did that people frowned on and weren't approving of, but Sam's heart was in the right place, and he was the one who pushed for going into unionist areas and trying to bring our message, etc. And Sam I stayed friendly with. In fact, I got married from Sam's house in Dublin. He drove me to my wedding 45 years ago. Anyway, Jack McKenna from Derrybank, a gentleman. And who will forget Joe Campbell? Wee Joe. Hugh Mallon, who was up there on that today. And I'll tell you, I loved Wee Joe because he was the only person I didn't have to look up to. I spent my whole life looking up at people. But Joe was about the same size as myself. And at one stage, I rang up an estate agent for a flat in Canal Street. And the flat was mine, etc., etc., it was available, come along. As soon as I opened the door of the office and they saw who it was, oh, sorry, it's gone, somebody else came while you were, etc. So I'm very upset. I went over to wee Joe, told him my story. He always called me daughter. That's all right, daughter. Let me look after it. Off he went, put the coat on, over he went, came back with the keys. George daughter. So what did you do, Joe? Well, I just said to him now it would be a terrible thing if we had a civil rights picket going up and down outside your office. So I got the flat, and that was me, Joe. Sean Hollywood, of course. Sean, who I said came in the night of internment and stayed on. I think they're mostly, if I've left out any names, I apologise, but they're the ones who stick in my memory, who were very involved. Hugh Mallon never missed a meeting or anything like that. So they were very involved, and they're all gone from us now, and God be with them wherever they are.
In practical terms, the civil rights movement actually achieved what it set out to achieve. Was society more equal? Was it a fair system that you got? I mean, do you feel that you can look back with pride on that aspect, the delivery?
Yeah, let's remember what we were campaigning for. Voting, for example, and gerrymandering. I mean, you had a situation in Derry where the demography was a large Catholic majority population, and on the district council you had a majority unionists. That's what the gerrymandering meant, and Derry was probably at its most extreme. You had discrimination in the civil service. There were no Catholics in high places in the civil service. In the major employers, places like Harland and Wolff, Catholics didn't get a job. There was, like Margo, read better with the glasses off. There was in the judiciary were very, very few Catholic judges. In 1965, when there should have been a university built in Derry, or extended in Derry, it was built in Coleraine. Police officers were permitted to be members of the Orange Order. In Belfast, post-war, 97% of factories that were built were all built in Protestant areas. In Belfast, 97% of council employees were Protestant. That was the situation that we had then. That's what we were complaining about. That's what we were campaigning about. And look where we are today. We have very strong employment protection legislation. We have the Labour Relations Agency. We have the Office of the Industrial Tribunals. We have the Equality Commission. In housing, don't deny there are problems in housing, but it's not about allocation of houses anymore. We certainly need more social houses to be built. We have the police that we talk about and we see on the screen there. By the way, the Protestant Telegraph, which I have from 1968, says that Jerry Fitt got hit on the head with a baton because he headbutted a police officer, first of all. It was all his fault. But anyway, we had the police situation. Now we have a police service. We have a structure in the police where all political parties are represented on the policing board. You've been there. You've served there.
And so was Rosie Burke.
Yeah. And as Rosie, I see Rosie here has done that as well. I mean, that was unthinkable in 1968. We have a Human Rights Commission. We have a situation where no longer in the courts are prosecutions carried out by the police. The police do the investigations, and the prosecutions take place by an independent public prosecution service. Who could imagine that Gerry Adams's son, the son of Gerry Adams's lawyer, P.J. McCrory, Barra McCrory, could become Director of Public Prosecutions in Northern Ireland? Those things were unthinkable. Who would have thought that it would be possible to have not one, not two, but a number of Chief Justices of Northern Ireland from the Catholic nationalist tradition? So all of those things have taken place. That landscape that we saw and you looked at there in the clips back in 68, 69, up to 72, that landscape has changed fundamentally. And that has made an enormous difference to the quality of life that we have here in Northern Ireland. It's my daughter is here with her husband today. It's a totally different landscape than when I was growing up and when I was starting off in legal practice back in Newry. And it's welcome. Now, I'm not saying that everything is perfect and there aren't things that need to be done. There certainly are. And there are challenges out there. And Tommy referred to some of them earlier in relation to marriage equality, and those kind of issues are out there still to be dealt with and to be challenged. But there's a situation today different from in 68 when we were starting all of this, markedly changed. And I have tried to outline some of the points there in the points I've just made to you.
Margo. I said in some of the opening remarks that, James Heaney talked about contemporaries and imagining in Ireland that he now inhabits and we now inhabit. And I'd like to thank yourselves and the previous speakers for the vision that you have for creating the world that we have. But I'd like to ask you one question though. I mean, the equality battle goes on, not just about gay marriage, you referred to it already. Has much moved on really for the empowerment of women?
Oh, that's a difficult one. I think it's changed an awful lot. Not as much as a lot of the young women today want, but compared to our time, it's so much different. I mean, for instance, particularly in the South, I remember, right up to the 70s, if your house were bought, it was in the man's name. There was no jury service for women. More into burqa, marched for that and got it. There were so many different things. But what gives me great hope, and I see it particularly down south now, the young people they're on the march again. There were years there in the 80s and 90s and nothing seemed to be happening. I often wondered, where are the students? What are they doing? Why aren't they out marching or whatever? But they're really on the march again, and there's a great awareness. And I think, the social media has a lot to do with that. Now, there's a lot to be done for women, but compared to the late 60s and the 70s, it has moved on tremendously in a good way. But particularly in the South now, the homelessness thing is out of control. And I'm too old, I can't be going on the street anymore. But that's the one thing. I am surprised, they are very caught up in women's issues and the same-sex marriage and that. I wish they'd put some of that energy into going out. They should be occupying houses all over the place. They should be down at the gates of the door. There should be a constant march going on, because it's ridiculous the way people are left on the streets. And just because the ideology of the present government, now I know they've done an awful lot, we had an awful depression and we've come out of it, but not everyone has come out of it, but their ideology is private developers, this, that and the other. The councils, in the 30s and 40s, when Ireland hadn't a penny, when they hadn't an arse in their trousers, as people would say, they were building social housing, thousands and thousands of houses for people. And now, when we have loads of money, and what would you call it, that he called Castle, I don't know who called it, a kitty for if things go wrong, there's $1 billion in that or whatever. The councils all over Ireland should be out there building houses. There's no point in building under public-private partnership where the people can afford. Things have changed. There's an awful lot to be done yet. It's not there. We're a small country. We have the population the size of Manchester. If we can't provide housing and health to all the people, there's something terribly wrong. So I would say to the young ones now, get out there and do something about it.
Thank you. You can see that there's still fire burning away on Earth. So, last question. Any regrets? Would you do it again?
Yes, absolutely, no regrets whatsoever. What we stood for was correct, was justice. The issues that we highlighted today needed to be highlighted, they needed to be addressed, they needed to be taken on, things needed to change. The situation of the type of government that ran Northern Ireland from the 1920s up until the proroguement of Parliament in 72, that had to be taken on, that had to be challenged. The one difference that I would say between then and now from the student perspective was to the great annoyance of the union's establishment, those of us who were agitating in Queen's were doing so on the back of student grants. When I talked to my daughters and son about the concept of student grants, they look at me perplexed. What was that? Now you have no student grants and you have really, it seems to me, extraordinarily expensive fees as well, so that students are coming out of university with a huge amount of debt. Might be some of the reasons why they can't just be as radical and as out there on the issues that Margo has quite rightly identified. Maybe that's part of it, but we were, I think, a very lucky generation to go to Queen's, go to UCD, go to Trinity or wherever, and to do so on the back of student grants. That's the one thing that I think has changed from our day up to now for the worse in Northern Ireland. And as I say, maybe just a reason why children maybe aren't, young people aren't just as radical as they were. But no regrets whatsoever in what we tried to do, and no regrets when you see where we are today.
Margo, I'll give you the last word. In our house, the wife always gets the last word. So
Things have changed. No regrets. It had to be done as Rory has said. The regime that were in place at the time, something had to be done. Things had to change here, and so I have no regrets from that. But as Tommy said, one regrets the 3,000 who were killed. That we never foresaw that. We didn't really see that coming down the road. So you can never forget that so many people died all through the years. But the one thing that exercises me now is Brexit. And the stupidity of the DUP. Will they ever learn? Or do they think they're... I mean, here we had a situation for 20 years where there was relative peace in Northern Ireland, where we were up and down, doing the, commerce, everything, cooperation at government level, at all sorts of levels. And then this came along and the DUP said, vote for it, vote to me. They want a hard border back. Well, all I can say is that Brexit might achieve very soon what the Provost couldn't do in 30 years. So they need to watch it. But I mean, that's the coming thing now, Brexit, and how it's going to affect everything. I may have left Newry, but my husband's from Belfast, so I've been up and down constantly over the years, and how easy it got. I mean, my children, when they were small, would remember the soldiers on the border, they would remember the checkpoints. And my husband's always very cheeky when I ask him, where are you going? Up there. Where are you coming from? Down there. Open your boots, sir. You know, the children used to dread the border because of this. But anyway, but then in the last number of years, up and down all the time, no problem. No problem. So things were working out, and as Rory has well pointed out, so much was achieved over the years, and all due basically to the civil rights movement. But time will tell how it moved now.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. like to thank our guests because it's very illuminating to listen to them. It's very obvious that they're still very passionate about what they believe in, and we're going to let you get fed again. You can't blame me for Brexit. I spent 2 years as chair of Remain, so you don't get and we keep pointing out to the unionists that we didn't vote Remain here. What we'll do is we'll get your dessert in, and then if we'd ask the chief to come back up and take out some questions, just a couple of questions. I'm aware that some people like to make speeches, and I'm going to curtail your enthusiasm for doing that. Just take a couple of questions from the floor. Okay, thank you.